We spent a lot of time on this show talking to different historical societies in the Northwoods, but it's always been through computer screens. But not anymore. We're going to be talking to a lot of different historical society members from all over the Northwoods by going to the museums and talking about what is actually inside the museums. We start today with the Rhinelander Historical Museum. I'm now inside the Rhinelander Historical Society Museum with Bill Vankos. Bill, it's good to see you in person, not behind a computer screen.
I do have a whole body instead of just a face.
Well, let's put your mind to work here. We're going to talk about the Historical Society Museum. I want to just start with the building itself. Can you tell us about the history of the building?
Certainly can. This house was built in 1894, which coincides with the city of Rhinelander being incorporated. So the village was formed in 1882. 12 years later, it was incorporated as a city, and that's the year that this house was built. And it was built for Mrs. Van Slayton, and the object was to have it as a boarding house. And she was a widow, and it was a way and it was fairly common back then for widows to have boarding houses as a way of supporting themselves. So the downstairs was the common area, and then upstairs on the second and third floor were the individual rooms for the boarders.
Got it. And the Historical Society Museum is doing something different this season that they have done in the past, but you guys have expanded your hours?
That's correct. We finally got enough docents to be open a third day on Saturdays, so we'll now be open on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So we're hoping that we can catch a lot more of the weekend visitors to the community. So we're very excited about that. After being shuttered last year, we're just excited to welcome people Tuesdays, Thursdays, or Saturdays right now.
Do you mind if I bring in this little contraption?
No.
So, Bill, you greeted me at the museum with this contraption, and I want our viewers at home to guess what this might be, because it stumped me.
Okay. I'll give you a hint. Little children often guess a pogo stick, which is not correct.
So maybe you want me to do the mechanism? Would you like to do that? Here, let me give it a shot.
There's a little, I apologize, there's a little bit of dust on the floor.
Yeah, let me try to get that dust.
So in fact, it's a vacuum cleaner, a true vacuum, by pulling the handle and creating the vacuum to suck up
I
the
didn't
dirt.
think about the name etymology there, but it kind of creates this suction vacuum. Okay. We're back on Up North at 4, still inside the Rhinelander Historical Society Museum with Bill Vankos. Bill, we're in the same room as the friendship quilt, but what is this right here?
This is a lovely piece of furniture. You can tell that somebody of prominence must have had it. It's cherry and mahogany. It's a beautiful bed. Just happens to be the bed from Mr. Rhinelander, the namesake of our city. So again, for people who may not be familiar with him, he was the president of a railroad called the Milwaukee Lakeshore and Western Railroad. They were putting a line in from Milwaukee to Ontonagon, Michigan. The Brown brothers heard about that and realized that was about 15 miles away from this area, at that time referred to as Pelican Rapids, and thought, this is going to fit into our business scheme perfectly. If we can have a railroad, we can put sawmills up here and ship the lumber out. So they negotiated with the railroad. They were successful. They built a good business case. They gave the railroad half of their property, 1,500 acres, half of that they owned, and they agreed to name the then village, or to-be village of, with the name of Rhinelander. So he had a rail car, so he would travel around the country inspecting his lines, doing all of those things. So this was a bed inside his rail car. Now in 1893, they sold out to Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. So he went back to New York. He had a number of other business adventures going on. So he realized he wasn't going to be traveling anymore. So he gifted this bed to a lady who had done some cooking and things for him when he would visit. He had been up here a couple different times. So he gifted this bed to her. And we've got the provenance. It was donated to us by the Scheidegger family. So he gives it to that lady. Some years later, she in partial payment for some carpentry work, gave this bed to one of the Scheidegger family members, so that's how it got into their family. I'm told the children actually slept in it back in the 70s for a while, so it got some use, and then they were gracious enough to allow it to come here so that we can share it with everybody. So again, one of a kind item, just like many of the things that we have here at the museum. There is only one of them, and we're fortunate enough to have it here.
When I think of Frederick Rhinelander, you know, he was not really involved in the Rhinelander community. Do you have any other Rhinelander artifacts from Frederick Rhinelander?
No, there really wasn't much other than his couple of visits that he was here. There is a lasting legacy besides the name of his city, though. When this village was created, it was a small parcel, and they came to naming the streets. And the Brown family was not sentimental. This was a business adventure for them. So in the initial plat in 1882 of the original village, there's 3 streets that were tied to the Browns. Brown Street, Anderson Street, and then Young Street, because Mr. Young actually did the plat. The rest of the streets were all tied to Rhinelander. So if we start, and it was a small area, the north part of the original plat was Frederick Street, Mr. Rhinelander's first name. If we come down to Rives, one of his daughters married a Rives. We come to Pelham Street that we're on right now. That was the town in New York where the Rhinelanders lived. King Street, if we go to our south a little bit, another one of his daughters married a king. But my 2 favorite ones are Stevens and Davenport. Stevens Street is Mr. Rhinelander's mother's maiden name. But the one that really gets me, that the prominent streets were really Brown, Stevens, and Davenport. Now, Davenport was the key one. Davenport Street was actually Mr. Rhinelander's mother-in-law's maiden name. So to me, it's quite a stretch. And to use that as, like I said, one of the predominant streets in town, I just find that humorous, I guess. So he left his legacy with his naming, I guess, if you will.
That is so interesting. You probably have more to tell, Bill. We can't fit it into the segment. We'll be right back on Up North at 4. We're back on Up North at 4, still inside the Rhinelander Historical Society Museum. And kind of remarkable, we haven't really mentioned Eugene Shepard yet, the biggest character in Rhinelander's history. But we're going to focus on him today, Bill. Is that right?
Okay, we certainly can, and this is our little section for him. So he's most noted for his promotion of the hodag. In 1893, he announced in the paper that he attempted to capture it, but it got killed in the process. And then 3 years later, he announced that he did capture it. Coincided with the first Oneida County Fair, and then it was all hodag from then on. So this was the reenactment of the capture of the hodag. This is Mr. Shepard on the right-hand side with the pole, and this is one of his sons, Leighton, that's the supposed victim of the hodag. So it starts with that. Mr. Shepard, actually, when he captured the hodag, he lived 4 houses from the museum just down the street here on Pelham Street. So people would come there to view it. So some of the items that we have, he had this boat, and again, we talked earlier about he made a lot of money, spent a lot of money. He had some pretty highs and lows. He obviously had some money around 1903 because he commissioned the Rhinelander Boat Company to build him a boat. 61 feet long, 11 feet wide. I mean, just a huge boat. He paid the boat company $11,000 to build this boat. Now, this is in 1903. You can imagine what that value would be today. He spent another $9,000 equipping it with things such as monogram silverware, a fancy bell, just all the furniture, everything like that. So you take $20,000 in the early 90s is probably north of $500,000 today. So we have those items. We have one of his plat books. He again was this timber cruiser and surveyor, so he made a plat book, and again, his reputation was just unchallenged. He just was on the top of his game when it came to surveying. So he created a plat book, sold for $5 each. He had a company down in Milwaukee that was printing it. They had a fire and it destroyed the books. So shortly after that, copies of these books were selling for as much as $100. Again, we're talking early 1900s pricing, so we're talking significant amount of money. Obviously, we wouldn't want people handling that, but what we've done is made a copy of it, and so people can come and they can look at their area where they're on the lake where they live or whatever and see what's in there without disturbing that. We also have a letter that he wrote. He had very distinctive printing. And he was involved with the Immigration Society here. He was the county clerk. He held a number of positions in here. So that's the original letter there. We have a copy of it over there, so again, people can read those. So we want to share this with people, but obviously we want to protect the originals. There was a book that, it's kind of a poem type book that he claimed to have written, but there's some evidence up there that he had some ghostwriters helping him with that. We have some of the abstracts from his home down in there. Again, those are not, we could make copies, I suppose, for people, but as of right now, we just have them behind the cabinet. So again, just trying to share stories of Mr. Shepherd and sharing some of the items, again, one-of-a-kind kind of items that we have here.
Thanks so much, Bill. We'll be right back in Up North at 4. We're back on Up North at 4, still inside the Rhinelander Historical Society Museum. Last stop on our trip. Bill Vankos, this is a refrigerator, right? Tell us about it.
Correct. It's called a refrigerator. It's not what we think of when we think of refrigerators. This would be more of an ice box or a cooler type thing. But this is an example of one of the airtight refrigerators that were made by the Rhinelander Refrigerator Company. They were in business from 1902 to 1935. So they made, early on they were all wood, mostly oak outside, and then later on they made them more modern with this porcelain covering. So this one's one of the later ones with the porcelain. So what you do is you would get a block of ice from the Iceman. The ice would be cut out of Boom Lake in the winter. They would be packed in a ice house in sawdust to keep for the whole year, and then they'd be delivered to the houses. So you'd they would bring a block of ice in probably once a week and put it into the ice chamber here. It then close it up. You try to, the days where we stand in front of the refrigerator and say, gosh, what should we have today? Back then they wanted to do it a little bit quicker than that, and they didn't keep a lot of stuff because they had grocery stores every couple of blocks, so that they didn't pack it like we do today, but they wanted to keep their milk cold and the butter and things like that. So they would do that. As the ice melted, it would get caught into a pan down there, and that was very typically one of the chores of the children of the family, was to empty that pan, and it's not something you wanted to just brush off, because otherwise you'd have a wet floor and you'd be in bigger trouble. So you wanted to keep a good eye on that. So yeah, this was a South Side business, along with Rhinelander Brewing Company, with Rhinelander Boat Company, with the Wabash Screen Door Company. So there was a number of businesses on the South Side, one of which was the Rhinelander Refrigerator Company.
Bill, thanks so much for bringing me on this tour. We're just scratching the surface, right, of the Historical Society Museum?
Oh, my goodness, yeah. I mean, every room's just got so many items and stories to be told, and quite frankly, we're learning. Rare is the week goes by that we don't learn more things from people that come and talk about their experiences with a kitchen stove or with something else. So we're picking up little anecdotes every time. So I always joke, I think I learn as much as I give out in this thing. So yeah, we invite people to come in, just look around. It will probably remind them of some memories of grandma or grandpa or any of those things. I mean, that's what we're here for that kind of a situation. So yeah, we encourage everybody to come. Again, in the summer months, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we're open Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 10 in the morning until 4. And we also, if that time can't work for you, just call us and we can figure out a time. We'll make an appointment. We do that sometimes for family reunions and things like that. So we're very accommodating. Again, we just feel the responsibility to share this with as many people as we can. So come on down.
And I know there's a lot of people who help out the museum, but I have to personally thank you for being on my show, for being so instrumental for making this museum an awesome place to visit. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you in return for helping us promote this so that more people know about us and think of maybe this is a good place to stop and visit. So.
Yes, you all should stop and visit the Rhinelander Historical Society Museum. We'll be right back after the break.